And we're gonna go ahead and start off by asking our initial question, and that would be, let's say what? Exactly. This is where we hear what pilots have to say, or in this case, the ATC. We do have Kevin with us. We do have Mike with us. I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I wouldn't say the right things anyway. So, Kevin, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm Kevin. I'm a controller at Fort Worth Center. I've been with the FAA for 8 years, and Fort Worth Center is my first facility so far. I also head up the pilot outreach program at Fort Worth Center. So our program gets as many pilots in as possible in the spirit of promoting cross-familiarization and education between pilots and controllers alike. And so we invite as many pilots as are able in the North Texas area to come check us out.
Yeah, okay, sounds nice. And then how about for you, Mike?
Mike, been a controller for 19 years now. First 6 years in the military, Air Force, Little Rock Air Force Base. Currently working at D10. Prior to D10, I was in Nashville for 3.5 years or so. But been here for 9 years, a little over 9 years.
And D10 is regional approach for those who may not be familiar.
DFW approach, regional approach.
Yeah, I want to bring it all the way down real quick before we get taken off because we're gonna go into it. I feel like we're gonna get it. So just to give you all a quick heads up for the listeners or the viewers, we're gonna be talking a lot about obviously ATC things. We're gonna be talking a lot about different airspaces, and then we want to talk about the relationship between ATC and pilots, because that's what you're specializing in, right? So, and then you are a pilot and you do ATC. So this makes for a great mix. I see what you did. I appreciate you for inviting Mike as well. Yeah. But what I want to do is bring it all the way back down. And can you give just like textbook, dictionary, ATC like explanation of what ATC does for pilots? I know most pilots know, but we have a lot of brand new listeners who are thinking about being a pilot still too. So.
Let Mike take that one.
Anyone.
We keep you apart. Don't let you touch.
Yeah.
Get you from where you're starting to where you're going, ensure you're safe away from other airplanes, and really just a simple explanation. It's not a lot to it.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot to the job.
We are not the ones with the wands.
For
those who are not in aviation yet, if you're new to aviation listening to the podcast, we are not the ones standing out, marshaling the airplane in on the ramp to the jetway. Those are known as rampers or some form of that. But we are the ones. Typically people think of us in the control tower. And I think that's kind of a good place to start, is defining the 3 different types of air traffic control, which are the control tower. Then you have TRACON, which is Mike, or approach or departure control. And then the center, or en route control, which is me. Okay. And so there are actually 3 different types of air traffic that all fall beneath the same umbrella of air traffic controller. Typically people just think of the control tower because that's the one you look at when you go to every airport, right?
And that's all I think about, right? So that's why I'm like,
very
I need
natural,
to understand
right?
the difference.
And so, but Mike and I actually work in radar rooms. So we work in dark rooms with no windows, and a bunch of radar screens, and everything for us is on a single screen, and it's all radar. Versus in the tower environment, and Mike's got tower experience, so feel free to jump in. But we're looking out the windows, and they're primarily only looking out the windows. They do have some radar to supplement, but almost everything they're doing is visual. And that's the big difference there. So the tower owns the immediate airspace around the airport and the runways and taxiways. So if you go out to any airport, whether it's Addison, DFW, or any airport across the country, if there's a control tower there, those controllers up there are handling the taxiways, the runways, and the roughly 4 or 5 miles around the airport. Right. And then you get outwards of that, both above, and they go up to maybe 3,000 feet above the ground. And you get above and beyond that, that's when the TRACON comes in. That's when approach control or departure. That's where Mike is at regional approach. They handle the broad airspace around that. Okay. And then you get above and beyond that, and that's the centers. So the centers are kind of the big ones, and then inside of those are TRACONs, and then you have the towers. And the TRACONs are really the ones who do all the sequencing, the fine tuning into the runways, whereas the center is more responsible for not only the airspace just out there, kind of, so to speak, in the middle of nowhere, in whether it's for us, way east or way west Texas, where there are no TRACONs just because there's not enough traffic to warrant one. But then on the but the center will set up the sequence into the TRACON so that they have a sequence that they then take to the runway. So the center will basically sequence to one common point, and then the TRACON will take that and sequence it into the runway or runways.
Gotcha. And I know this isn't going to be in maybe the right terms, but it sounds like you guys, each section's basically a different field of responsibility for people who can oversee that space. And you're right. What I was thinking of was just people in towers. So I wasn't sure what it all looked like. I always wondered what the rooms looked like. And you said you're working on radars and things like
Just
that.
a dark
So
room with radar screens.
exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
once that airplane, whether it's a thrust aviation plane or whether it's a Delta Airlines plane, once that gets up and out of the runway and starts flying away, the tower just hands them off to the TRACON at that point, and the TRACON takes it from there because the tower is just worried about their immediate environment there and the runways and the taxiways, and that's after that it's all radar.
Okay, gotcha. So the function for the TRACON then, what are some of the things that you're looking out for to whether it be prevent or make sure it goes correct? Like, what are some of the things you're looking out for? Is it the right question to ask?
Yeah, basically. I mean, like I said earlier, just kind of keeping them separated, make sure they don't touch each other.
Right.
Like Kevin said, finalizing the sequences into and out of the airports.
Okay. Is there anything like maybe a young pilot that may be training here at Thrust or maybe a CFI or something that they may need to know about operating in airspaces that are big enough to have a TRACON? Is there any differences they might need to know?
Just listen. If you want flight following, listen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It happens more often than not. We're trying to reach somebody because there's traffic going head on with them, and they're not listening to us.
That's scary. Yeah.
It is.
I think
Yeah,
it's an important almost skill you have to get as a student pilot, because you're obviously up there with an instructor. If not if you're a flight student with Thrust or whatever flight school, but I'm sure you're communicating with your instructor back and forth, but you really have to have that other ear perked up for your call sign.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that is a skill you're going to take for your entire aviation career,
Mm-hmm.
because if you've ever been in the cockpit of an airliner or just seen videos, I can tell you those pilots up there are not just staring straight ahead, just waiting to hear their call. They're talking, they're communicate. They're, whether it's official to the airplane or whether they're just asking each other how their weekend was. When they're up there at cruise, the airplane's on autopilot and there's not much active stuff they have to do.
Yeah.
But most of the airline folks, because they have thousands of hours experience, are very good at just having their ear perked up for their call sign.
Mm-hmm.
And that way they can pause their conversation and answer the radio call, and then they get back into it. But and I think that's a skill that students should work on early on, even with their flight instructors, as they're working with them to just perk up whenever they hear their call sign. And don't be afraid, especially if you hear silence and no one answers, hey, was that for us?
Yeah.
And make sure that that they didn't miss something.
I do know actually one thing Patrick was even wondering about, because we've started doing how did he say this? So we started having call signs versus just tel numbers, and so me, and some of the CFIs, we were curious, like, do you find that to be a little more helpful? What do you think about the tel signs versus tel numbers?
I like it.
Yeah.
Thrust flight in particular. Yeah, it's.
I mean, you can definitely see
easier,
that thrust flight.
Way easier. Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's also less to say. Thrust.
It is
whatever numbers versus no number.
Exactly.
How many numbers or letters and whatnot. And
yeah.
And I think for the pilots, it's good too, because there are tons of Cessna Skyhawks out there, right? And so if it's Cessna, then everyone kind of has to perk up for a split second, like, oh, not us, right? But if it's Thrust, there's a higher likelihood that if you're a Thrust pilot, we're talking to you, because you're one of the maybe 10 that are out there versus one of the 50 Skyhawks.
Right.
Number up.
More than that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's another question that I'm going to ask you guys. It's a little goofy maybe, but are you familiar with the term thrusted yet?
Yeah, we actually say that at work.
Yeah, you got thrusted.
Oh, I just got thrusted. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. There we go. So I had to see how far out it's made it, because I mean the comm tower is here. I mean they're just like we're getting thrusted today, you know. But because we have a lot of students, we have a lot of CFIs out here flying the planes. We're working with a lot of people, so we keep them out there in the sky and on the taxiway and all that good stuff. But that's funny. I had to ask. Okay, well, I want to ask you guys a few things then. So, Kevin, thank you for giving me a heads up on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate for anyone who may not have listened or watched before, I'm not a pilot. I learn as I go. I've learned a lot since I've been here. We're about how many episodes lead to RVN again? You guys are the first time we've had anyone from ATC on here. I'm really excited about that. That being said, let's see. There was one of the early ones. Why is it so important for pilots to know about what's happening on the other side of the radio? That's really something I did want to know. Like, that's kind of like probably your mission, right?
Yeah, that's really the mission behind the pilot outreach program, in my opinion, is because it's one thing to learn everything you have to do to be a pilot, and it's one thing to know what a landing clearance means or what radar contact means, right? Like a phrase that pilots hear thousands of times in their career, radar contact, but like, what does it actually mean? And what is it mean if radar contact is lost. And so the why behind everything, I believe, is so important because it makes everything make more sense. And when I get trainees that are coming in, and I'm a trainer, as I'm sure Mike is, and
unfortunately,
you got a lot of training to do.
So we get these new controllers coming in, and for those who aren't pilots, they look at an approach plate, they look at an approach chart, and they don't have a clue what it means, or what it is, or what it means, what anything means, right? And so you can go through all the book knowledge, and you can go through what each element of the chart is, but in my opinion, until you understand how the pilot is to fly the approach, or you take a hold, you look at a charted hold, or even an uncharted, unpublished hold, and it's really important to understand, okay, you just cleared that guy to hold. What's he going to do? What's that holding pattern going to look like? And oftentimes the trainees, the new controllers who aren't pilots say, well, I don't really know. It's like, well, it's really important that you understand what you've cleared that airplane to do.
Yeah.
And so
it's part of a bigger picture is the idea, right?
And I think just
on both sides,
just bringing that big picture into fruition, and understanding what that controller is doing is so important. And the exact same thing happens the other way, is that if pilots can understand what we are doing, and if they can take their mental picture of what ATC is and make it a reality, i.e. visiting a tower, visiting a TRACON, visiting a center, and seeing it firsthand, not only will you become more well-versed and educated, but you'll become more comfortable. And I think especially some low-time pilots who may be a little nervous to talk to us, it's my hope that getting on the other side of the mic and seeing us in person, seeing us do the job, will help ease those nerves, and realize that we are not the sky police. We are not here to get you in trouble. We are not here. We are here to help you. And like Mike said, we're here to keep you apart from both airplanes and obstructions, and just make everything flow safely and efficiently.
Yeah. And then it's pretty nerve-wracking, I've heard from students, like, to try to get used to the comms. What if you say the wrong thing? What if I don't understand? What if I sound dumb or something like that? I'm just curious if there's anything to highlight there, problem areas.
I think it really just comes down to it's called mic fright is kind of the slang term behind it. It's the fear behind hitting that push to talk and calling ATC. Now, of course, typically the control tower is the first one that gets that new mic fright, right? Because generally your first call is going to be probably taxiing out to the runway. It's the first time the CFI is going to say, okay, you ready to try it? And, as they get up and airborne with us, of course, it could very well be their first call in a radar environment. And so it's new, right? They're not taxiing, they're not clearing for takeoff. We're now giving altimeter settings. We're giving, Mike gives Bravo clearances and vectors, right?
And traffic calls.
Right. You're right. Yeah. Traffic calls a big one. Right. Understanding, okay, like where to look and, what altitude, what direction. And, but that kind of goes back to the why behind everything. And that we all have phraseology. Controllers have phraseology and pilots have phraseology. And there's a method behind what you can expect to hear. And it's important that you don't get into a level of complacency by an expectation bias of always expecting to hear the same thing.
Right.
But at the same time, if you know what you're expecting to hear as far as a traffic call, you hear your thrusts 1, 2, 3 traffic. Okay, I know I'm going to get a place to look, and a distance and a direction they're flying, and I'm going to look out for them. Maybe a type airplane, whatever. Yeah. And so versus if you don't know to expect that sequence of phraseology, you're just kind of like, whoa, like what did that guy just say? And Mike's working 20 airplanes on the final, and he's getting this traffic call out just barely in between a vector on the final, and he doesn't have time to repeat himself. So if he's met with silence or a say again, it kills him. It really kills him.
Definitely adds to the workload. Yeah, you got to start scrambling.
Man, I can imagine. It's like getting behind on orders, but it's just literally phrases that you don't have time to redo. Yep. It's like orders. Because I've worked in a lot of restaurants back in the day, but
no, that's a good analogy though. Honestly, it's because the orders just keep on coming, and it's like you can't work fast enough.
And that is a nerve-wracking.
Very much happens.
Yeah. So but in this scenario, obviously, there's a lot more to navigate, and it's also very important safety-wise. But I'm wondering then, and I think this might be for you, Mike, to ask. So we're gonna go into some of the stuff about like Bravo and Delta, right? Or is it Charlie? My bad. I'm gonna say that again.
Bravo.
Well, aren't we? Well,
this
I don't
is
know
a
the
Delta
difference.
here.
Yeah, there's a Delta here, right?
Yes.
So I'm curious if you can maybe give me some of the differences between those different types of airspaces, because I do want to go into some of the misconceptions that go into the approaches and how some of that is controlled. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. Well, there's a ton of different airspaces.
Yeah.
There's Alpha, which is 18.0 and above. Bravos are very controlled, restrictive airspaces. You have to be cleared into a Bravo airspace, and if you're VFR, IFRs are always cleared in.
Okay.
The Charlies are after that. I'm not real. I don't remember. I used to work one, but I don't remember.
Yeah.
Charlie is
you
just
need-
the two-way radio communications
Yeah.
and a mode C.
correct.
Okay.
And
So you
so
probably know
you
more
don't need
about
a
this than I
clearance
do.
into a Charlie, right?
Because what I'm wondering is, if someone or either of you, I'm not sure who would want to answer, but if you could answer or explain the misconception that approach control only owns the Class Bravo or Class Charlie, and how aircraft skirting those types of airspaces can still be very much a big issue. Yeah.
There's a huge issue with that a
Yeah.
lot of times. So on the DFW final,
Mhm.
the Bravo shelf, the bottom of the shelf is 3,000 feet.
Mhm.
So you're legal to fly underneath that shelf as a VFR airplane, not talking to anybody, at 2,999 feet.
Okay.
Airlines are at 3,000. You're 1 foot below
1 foot.
them.
Wow.
Things happen.
It's kind of scary.
Yeah, you're going to be in a lot of wake, or maybe your altimeter setting is off just a little bit, and you might, bad
Yeah.
things might happen.
Yeah, gotcha. And then
Yeah.
what do you do? So what are they doing wrong when they get in that situation?
They're not wrong. They're legal to do it. It's just not smart.
Okay.
And,
Okay.
know,
and
you
that's a
should-
huge thing
I
that we
see.
preach on the Pilot Hours team is legality versus smart and safe. And just because something is legal doesn't mean it's a smart and safe idea.
Yeah.
And that's a perfect example of it. Is yes, you can fly 1 foot under the Bravo, and the FAA can say nothing about it.
Mhm.
But wake turbulence can say something about it. And
Yeah.
it's not smart. It's not smart, and it's not safe to do. And so, that goes again, circling back to the why about behind. If you're just reading, the FARs, say, oh, Class Bravo, okay, well, I'm out of it. I'm a foot
within
below,
the-
so we're good.
Yeah.
If you could be a total bookworm on the FARs and never break a regulation, but you're not necessarily safe in doing that. And so, but if you understand the why of like, oh, well, why is it a bad idea to fly a foot under the Bravo? Now you're okay. Now I'm going to maybe fly around or talk to ATC or fly at least 500 feet below the Bravo, right? So there are ways to do it safely and legally at the same time.
That makes sense. If somebody finds themselves in that situation where they're just like a foot under, and maybe they don't realize it, or they're, hey, I don't know if I'm good right now. What would you say the best call of action would be there?
Call us.
Yeah, just
call
ask,
us.
right?
Hey, am I okay here? Hey, this is November such and such.
Mm-hmm.
Just get fly following.
Yeah. Are they? What if
Or
they're
descend
worried?
a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, and then so if they're nervous about it, then they should ask. But if they're
100%.
if they're not paying attention, and because y'all are working with radar, right? So
Yeah.
you're able to see these things, right? You can see the air.
We see
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. So what do you do in that situation? What kind of call goes out that
we
way?
usually track them. If it's really egregious, if they're like well into the Bravo and we're moving airliners away from them,
Mhm.
we'll track them. And when they land, we'll have wherever they landed to, ask the tower or the center or something to have that airplane call us so we can talk to them.
That's if
Yeah,
they actually
okay.
violate the Bravo.
Yeah,
And,
Alright.
you're not going to be in trouble. It's just going to be like, hey, pay more attention. What was going on?
Yeah.
So
It's communication. That's
Yeah,
all.
we're-
That makes sense.
we're not there to get people in trouble or
Right.
lose their licenses or any
Yeah.
of that
and
stuff.
that's really that's a huge misconception of us is that, and that's what I think creates a lot of that mic fright, is that we are there to get them in trouble, and that they're going to lose their license if they make a mistake. But reality is, you are safer if you're talking to us, because we can tell you what's around you that you might not know. And if you stray into the Bravo or you start heading toward it, we can help you out, but you have to give us that opportunity by making that optional call. And unless you're in that, Bravo, Charlie, or Delta airspace as a VFR pilot, you don't have to make that call. It's not required, but again, legality versus safe and smart.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And I'm sure there's like so much there to go into. I could sit here and probably ask questions all day.
Oh, yeah.
But I guess one of the last things I would ask, and where do you think the barrier really is outside of knowledge? Do you think there's sometimes like you said, fear, maybe like, you don't want to talk on the mic and say the wrong thing?
A lot of pilots don't call because they don't want to be inconvenienced.
Okay.
They want to just do what they're doing, fly on the routing they're flying on, the altitude they want.
Okay.
Because if you call me, I might have to turn you, climb you, descend you, reference other traffic. It's easier to move one airplane versus the many.
Okay.
A lot of pilots don't want to deal with that.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
That's a great point. And we see that a lot in our center environment as well, because pilots often think that if they get away from the Bravo, they're clear. They're out of the way. And circling back to, I think, one question we didn't hit on with Mike is that regional owns 5 to 10 miles outside the Bravo.
Oh.
And that's specifically for regional. The other TRACONs are very similar, but I think it's important that pilots realize the Bravo is not approach control, and approach control is not the Bravo. The Bravo is a piece of airspace that lies within approach.
Okay.
And the same thing goes for Charlies, and Deltas, of course, a little different because that's usually with the tower. But Charlies and Bravos are just types of airspace that lie within the lateral confines and vertical of approach control. And so just because you're a mile outside of it and you're like, oh, I'm just going to skirt it like I'm out of airspace, you're not. You're not,
still
because
within approach.
you're still within it. You could still be a problem. And so getting back to what I was saying is that we see a lot of that where pilots are, 60 miles from DFW airport, 30 miles outside the outer Bravo ring. And they just think, oh, we're in the middle of nowhere. There's no one out here. But it just takes a little bit of thinking outside the box to realize that, yes, the Bravo's busy. That's where the bulk of the traffic goes in and comes out. But you have to, after they leave the Bravo, they're still coming in and going out. And so you have to realize that there are still busy areas of airspace that aren't the Bravo. It's just the Bravo is where everything funnels into, right? Yes. And it's just a broader funnel outside of that. I mean, it's still a funnel. It's still highly congested airspace. So yeah, I think the misconception that they are just not bothering us at all. And on the other side of that is that they are rarely a bother when they're talking to us, because again, like Mike said, we can control them. And I get it. Time is money, and if we turn them out of their way, they might not like that. But the reality is we're not in the business of turning airplanes for fun. We're not going to give you a vector just because we felt like it. And if you don't know why we're turning you, if you're getting flight following, you don't know why we're turning you, I guarantee you there's a reason, and it's a great reason that you got flight following that day, because you probably would have just been straight ahead in level flight if you had been on 1200 code not talking to us. So there's, you should really be saying like, oh, I don't know why he's turning me, but I'm glad I'm talking to him because I know I'm safer because of it.
Right.
And there's a lot of...
You think that people don't... You think that that's not really the way it's thought of?
I mean,
no, absolutely not.
Plenty of pilots question why they're getting turned. And certainly we're in this era of ADS-B now. And I've pulled some data from the pilot outreach team, specifically to Fort Worth Center, where we don't own any Bravo, Charlie, or Delta in our Fort Worth Center airspace. So that means every pilot who we talk to VFR is making a conscious decision to talk to us. Mike owns the Bravo. So every pilot has to talk to him if they're going to go through the Bravo. So it's a little bit different with that retrospect. But for us, we are working half the amount of flight followings we did today than we were in 2017. Half. And so literally we have slashed that number in half. And I believe it's because of this era of ADS-B, which is, for those who don't know, it's a think of it kind of as a GPS tracker of all the airplanes out there. It's kind of the most basic way I can put it, but where these pilots now have iPads or visual GPS displays in their cockpit where they can see the traffic that's all around them. And I think there's complacency that's come because of that, where pilots now
rely
think,
on their own.
Yeah, pilots think, I've got the whole picture now. I can see everyone out there.
Electronic avionics and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah.
And now, don't get me wrong. Technology is terrific, and I think that aviation is safer today than ever before because of it. However, it introduces this level of complacency that can be very dangerous to a pilot who has spent a lot of money on this technology, but now thinks, oh, I don't need to bother ATC. In reality, you're not a bother to us. It makes our job harder oftentimes when you're not talking to us.
Yes.
And yes, you can see the 20 airplanes out in front of you, but you don't know what they're doing.
Right.
They might be heading, we might be about to vector them right toward you because of weather or a TFR or that's just how the finals go, right? And so that's the whole thing, is that it's a great piece of technology for situational awareness, but without the full picture of what ATC is doing with that traffic,
right,
you are at a disadvantage.
And then even then they can leave you guys in a blind spot, right? If they're moving around in a way that you're not understanding.
That's a big problem too.
Right?
Oh,
so because my next question was going to be to follow up and say, let's say there's a pilot out there, and a lot of pilots know what they're doing, or maybe they're tenured, or maybe, like you said, they've gotten complacent with the technology and they manage well by themselves often or something like that. Maybe that's what they're thinking, right? If it sounds like there may be some insight that they should have, that is, how is it helping you guys when they communicate, even if they think they're good?
If they're talking to us, we got a verified altitude and we can kind of get a feel for what they're doing. Are you going up over a lake or something and doing acrobatic maneuvers, well,
Yeah.
you're easier to miss. I know what you're doing. I know where you're going to be. I know what altitudes you're going to be at.
Okay.
I can work around you.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And so if they don't communicate, let's say they're going out there and doing exactly that,
Happens
and
all the time.
right. And in what way does that catch you off guard and throw a wrench in your program?
I don't know what you're doing, so I got to steer clear of that area. So
Yeah.
now I'm funneling all these airplanes that would be going that way into other routings with
So
the other airplanes, and just more of a headache.
it's not
for
even
us.
really just you at that point that they're affecting, right? They're hogging the airspace without any sort of communication.
Yeah.
It's like sitting
Which
next to
they're more
someone,
than welcome to,
right?
But
No, and it's a huge
I
headache
say
too.
hogging, but you know,
It's a huge headache too, because if you have two airplanes, you're talking to one, you're not talking to the other, and they're head on, and you say, okay, you tell your one turn 30 degrees left, and then the other guy turns 30 right.
Yeah.
And they're head on. That means they're head on again. And it's sometimes it literally feels like the other one is just messing with you. And you're not talking to them, but you're just, I mean, it's like, how is this guy? You're 2 or 3 vectors into the one you're talking to, and the other guy's just doing the opposite to counteract your vectors. And so that's again where not talking to us can make our lives a lot harder, because if we're talking to both, we just do a quick 10 left on one guy and tell the other guy about the traffic, tell him not to turn, and they'll pass, half mile off the wing, no problem for 2 VFRs. Yeah. It's a nice day. They'll get each other in sight. Everyone's safe. Yeah. And, but yeah, without talking to that other one, it can create a real hassle.
That makes me want to ask too, because you guys said you work in radar, and that's how you see some of what's going on. And I don't know if this is going to be a redundant question, but I wanted to ask, what is one of the biggest topics when it comes to radar environment and general aviation? Outside of, I don't know if that's one of the biggest topics that we just talked about. That's why I wanted to ask.
It's a pretty big topic.
Yeah, I know it's like probably.
I mean, just kind of what we were already touching on. Get flight following.
Yep.
Talk to us, and just the amount of, whether it's mic fried or whatever it is, you gotta please call us. And again, it's legal to not. It's absolutely legal to be on that 1200 code, steer clear of Bravo Charlie Delta, and you're good. Yep. But again, is it safe? And you hear in aviation, and I think even just around life, sometimes you hear like the big sky theory or similar of the big sky theory being, tiny planes, big sky, they won't hit. And it's, unfortunately, aviation history has proven otherwise. But also, if you watch the radar for a living, I mean, there are a lot of airplanes out there, and especially in Mike's airspace there are. Now, when you get out toward where I work, which is beyond regional approach, personally, I work out to far east Texas and into Arkansas. It is a lot more sparse out there. However, I still don't believe the big sky theory to exist even out there, because it just takes one time in your entire flying career to be at the exact same place, the exact same time, the exact same altitude as someone else, and that's it. Yeah. And I mean, I've seen some scary close calls on the radar between 2 airplanes that we weren't talking to that are out in the middle of seemingly nowhere. And it's just like, why are they even flying out here? Like, who is out here? Who lives out here? Who goes out here?
And not everyone's flying with the radar either.
Right.
So, I mean, that's something to take into account too. I mean, it's like defensive driving, right?
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure it's not driving, but
sometimes, some people like those old vintage historic planes that may not have the technology, and then nothing wrong with that at all. But they don't have that technology that a lot of the newer gen airplanes have today to be keeping an eye on what's out there. And so again, that complacency level of, we're out in the middle of nowhere, East Texas, we're all on our own. Not always, not always. And so we asked, just talk to us and we'll keep you safe out there.
I'm hoping that comes off like a lot of insight, on how y'all function and what you guys are responsible for, because at the end of the day, you're taking responsibility for an airspace, like a whole space and air, whether the big sky theory exists or not, you're responsible for that whole sky. So you gotta take it personal, not personal, but you got to take responsibility.
We own that airspace, yeah, and
exactly.
and we know what happens in there, and we see what happens that we aren't in charge of, and that it can get scary at times when we're not talking to those guys and we're just having to watch them miss each other.
Yeah. It can be a little intense. Yeah, I can imagine. I hear plenty of pilots talking about accidentally hitting a bird and things like that.
Sure.
And I know that's not a plane; it's a little smaller.
Bird's even smaller. Yeah,
that's even smaller. Yeah, I mean, maybe they don't have radar either, but you know what I mean. Like, if you can hit a bird, I'm sure it's not that far fetched.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
But I have one actually over here. So, Mike. I'm sorry, not Mike. Kevin, you reached out originally, right? And then you reached out to Mike so that we could have a little more perspective, right?
Right.
So I appreciate you for reaching out.
Absolutely.
Was there anything that made you reach out to Thrust to kind of like talk to us? I mean, obviously we have a lot of people training to be pilots, and they're probably great people to hear this. But what made you reach out, if you don't mind asking?
I mean, number one, you all have this platform, which is great. This
Mhm.
new, relatively new podcast for you all, and you're growing to be one of the, if not the biggest flight school in the Metroplex. So it's
Mhm.
very relevant to Mike and myself to speak to you all.
Mm.
And, we'd really like to preach to your CFIs, your students, to please, call for flight following. Or if you're getting canceled IFR, like keep the radar flight following on VFR.
Mhm.
I'm not sure how much Mike sees of that. I think overall pilots are more inclined to talk to the TRACONs for flight following because it's more congested airspace. And again,
Right.
they think as they get farther out, they don't have to.
Mhm.
But where we see a lot of the thrust flights doing their air work and maneuvers, it's still very congested airspace. It's really right on the boundary between regional approach and our airspace. And it's just not a good spot to be not talking to anybody, because we have jets that are going there. We have a lot of small GA that are going that area at all altitudes too.
Yeah.
And that's what you get with regional approach being the busiest standalone TRACON in the world. Is there is a ton of traffic
Mhm.
in this relatively small piece of airspace, and then even all that kind of just continues to trickle outward. So
Yeah, I
we would
guess
just love to, we'd love for everyone to get flight following, but specifically thrust, because we're seeing a lot of them.
since it's not like technically a requirement to make some of those communications, how do you set those expectations other than, just straight up doing outreach? Is that
Just education? Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's one of the big reasons that we're doing this is to shut down those misconceptions and to let people know that, even if you're going to or from a practice area, pick flight following up on the way. Maybe drop it when you get there, but at least we know you're out there.
Yeah.
And we, pick it back up on the way back to the airport. And little things like that, and
Well,
so
then maybe even the bigger question is then, like, is there ever a reason not to communicate or ask for flight following?
hardly ever. I mean,
Hardly ever. I mean, there will be times where we don't have the time
sure.
to offer the services because we've got
Right.
20, 30 other airplanes we're trying to control.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
And I
So
think
what
that-
happens in that scenario if you find yourself, it's a little bit busy right now? You just kind of say
terminate
that.
radar.
Oh,
Radar
yeah.
service terminate squawk VFR. For
Yeah,
change crew.
we'll have to terminate you
Sorry,
or
too busy.
unable your request.
Yeah.
But and I think that unfortunately for pilots who may have had that happen early on, that might have put a poor taste in their mouth for flight following. Like,
Yeah.
oh, like these guys are too busy to work us. But it's usually just a one-off. Try again in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Find another frequency.
That's what
Wait
I
for
wanna
the
know,
frequency
yeah.
to die down. And if not, try again the next flight. And don't let that one experience speak for the rest of your flying career. I think here in the Metroplex, here in Texas, we are very pro flight following. I've
That's
heard
what
of
I'm
stories
wondering
out east, East Coast, where it might not be that way because of low staffing. And we are in no way well staffed here
No.
in the Metroplex. However, we are not necessarily as critically staffed as some facilities out on the East Coast, the Northeast, Florida. And so I guess to the nationwide listeners who may not be local to Texas,
That's where we're getting. Yeah.
right. You may be shaking your head thinking, oh, I always get unabled for flight following. Like this isn't right. This doesn't apply to me. I would say, even if you're only successful flight following 10% of the time, you're now 10% safer than you would have been if you just never tried. So keep trying. And certainly if you venture out of that area that is typically unabled, try again with a new facility. Maybe it's a new approach control, maybe it's a new center facility. Just keep trying. And, eventually you're going to be lucky at one point or another. And then you're that much safer because of it for that flight.
One of the questions you asked was, and we wrote it down too, so and it might even be a student question. What are your biggest pet peeves from general aviation pilots? And now we've already talked about some of that, right? But I'm wondering if there's like a 1, 2, 3 real quick that we can kind of highlight. And it might be like a bad guy sounding kind of thing, but that way we can put it out there and see so people know.
Yeah. One of my biggest pet peeves is a pilot trying to call up for something and give me a dissertation. A 30-second transmission of, oh, we're here and we want to go there and this is what we're. Spit it out.
Yeah. So what does it sound like when they spit it
Because
out?
Better than that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's why I want to know. That's good though. 30 seconds sounds way too
The whole
long.
time you're sitting there trying to talk to us.
Yeah.
I've got other airplanes that are trying to talk to me and that I need to talk to, and now I'm missing a localizer because you're going on and on and on and on.
Yep. Yeah.
So
It
spit
all-
it out.
Spit it out.
The pet peeves,
Pertinent
most of them are
information.
going to come down to radio work.
Yeah.
And then, also, planes, VFRs that are not getting flight following, right? We talked plenty about that.
Yeah.
We'd like for everyone to be calling us for flight following. And as far as the radio work goes, like Mike said, the lengthy drawn out transmissions, just work on it. There's always ways to improve your radio work. I don't care if you are a 2,000-hour pilot, phrases like "this is," "with you," "I am," "we are." Like, these are all things that you can remove from your phraseology, and your transmission means the exact same thing. Like, you don't have to say "this is," because of course it's you. You're the one talking. Like, there are little things like that.
Because they can tell.
Well, just because I'm listening to you. Like, when you ask me a question, you don't say, "This is Zach," and I'm asking you a question, because I'm looking right at you.
Yes,
and you are talking to me. And so little things like that, you might think, oh, well, it's only like a second or two. But if every pilot were to do that across an hour, I mean, that's like 2 minutes of just frequency time that I got back.
Yeah.
Because pilots were that much more proficient on the radio.
So that makes sense. And it's probably, do you think that's because sometimes they're used to communicating with like maybe a tower when they're young, with their lower miles?
It doesn't really, I mean, you should be just as efficient on the radio as the tower, because Addison can be just as busy as we are. And, they're just bam, bam, bam all day long with the pattern and nonstop traffic. I think it's really just a matter of their, maybe nervousness, or they haven't put that much thought into really fine tuning their radio skills.
That makes sense.
I think a great way to, and I use this with my students, the controllers that I train. You go and you listen to a session. You say, hey, you don't realize this, but you are you're actively thinking on the frequency, or you're doing things that you don't realize in real time, but when you hear it back, you're like, oh my God, like I'm saying that.
You're right.
Pilots can use the same thing and record it, whether it's on their phone, or maybe they have some sort of fancy GoPro that they're recording. Just listen to yourself. Go to liveatc.net, find your hour that you were recording, and go to those archives. And listen to yourself. Be like, oh man, like, and it's really eye opening to hear how you sound on the radio, and you're like, I didn't know I was doing that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can only imagine, and it sounds like I can see the point of wanting to do the outreach now too, right? Just being on the same page, regardless. It seems like
it's just awareness.
Yeah,
it's awareness of all these things. Awareness of that. Yes, we want to talk to you for flight following. Yes, your radio work could probably use some work. It's an awareness of all that, and then hopefully that's being well received, and we can create a better national airspace system together because of it.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I love that. Well, we do have. I think we sourced a couple questions through our Instagram to be able to kind of find out some questions. We only got so many useful questions, right? But I know one of them was going to be, do you have to go to flight school? And we already answered that. You don't have to go to flight school. Another would be, what does the training look like? And now I think you kind of mentioned some of it earlier at the beginning. But yeah, what does some of the training look like?
So it all starts in Oklahoma City.
Yeah,
depending on your background. I don't know about CTI guys, but you said off the street, or
I was technically off the street for the hiring.
You guys go to
basics.
I did
the same thing. Yeah,
you got to go to basics too. Okay, so for them, they have to go to air traffic basics, and I didn't do that, but it's
because you came from a military
course
background
or something like that. Yeah.
It's I think for someone off the street right now, it's about a month of the air traffic basics.
They can do it at home now too.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
crazy. I think they might be getting away from that. Depends, but they're doing some Zoom stuff.
Nice.
And that's just, I mean, that is, you're taking someone who worked at Walmart and has no idea a Cessna from a 747, and you are teaching them exactly that air traffic basics. And it's kind of a catch-all across the board. And then it's about 2 to 3 months after that. So 1 month of that, and then 2 to 3 months after that of either Tracon Tower specific stuff, I guess just tower specific stuff, or
split
en route
courses.
Yeah. And so you get hired on, and they tell you if you're going to go the Tracon Tower route or the center route. There are two different options. It's not really an option though. They dictate.
They're like, well, you're meant for this one.
So realistically though, only about 50 to 60% pass the academy. So it's a very high washout rate. It's very black and white. And I kind of get it. They put so many people through the academy that it has to be, you can't go through all the gray stuff, because it would just draw out the process. And it's unfortunate for people who don't make it through, who maybe deserve to, and vice versa. But for the most part, they're putting the people through who deserve to make it through, and you get to your facility after that, and it's 97% on the job training at your facility. There are simulators, but most of it is all on the job. So there are
get through that first portion though to even get to that training.
Yep, you got to make it past Oklahoma City for 3 to 4 months, and then you get assigned. Sometimes you kind of get to choose, but more so assigned a facility to go to, and you can transfer out after that eventually. It's not the easiest process, but
Yeah.
it's all just on the
Depends on where you're working. I'm
Yeah.
stuck.
Yeah.
It's all on the
You're
job
there.
training after that, 97%, where there's a certified instructor standing or sitting right behind you, ready to correct anything that you do wrong. But most pilots have likely noticed that they've spoken to a trainee before, because they sound unsure of themselves, or they make a mistake, or they hear the trainer overkey them and correct what they've done wrong. So that's just all the process. And it can take 2, 3, 4 years to get fully certified, depending on the facility and the trainee and how quick you're catching on, how much training time you get. So a lot of variables involved, but that's the nutshell of it.
Yeah, no, I can. I feel like what would follow up after that is another question that they did have, which would be it's not actually related at all, but what I wanted to know was, do y'all have any? This is obviously not like the rest of the podcast, but it usually sometimes makes for a good thing to hear about. Do you have any favorite stories from working as a controller?
Endless stories.
I say favorite stories. I'm sure you have endless stories. Is there anything that comes to mind? Maybe it was a little funny, or something very memorable, maybe something scary.
Instead of drawing out with specific stories, I would encourage everyone to go to YouTube, look up Archie League Awards, specifically NATCA, NATCA. That's our union. Archie League it's a name, first name Archie, last name League. Every year, the union puts on an event that highlights some of the best saves of the year by controllers across the country, and some of them will bring tears to your eyes. It is incredibly moving to watch what our fellow coworkers are doing across the country every single day.
Yeah.
And some of them are incredible out of the box thinking and teamwork by the controllers and pilots themselves. Pilots have gotten themselves, whether it's an emergency situation or they've, VFR and IMC, whatever it is, there's some sort of bad situation going on, and the controllers save the day. And the best ones of the year are highlighted, and they're all on YouTube. And it's a really, you could spend hours watching them all the way back from 2016 or 17. I think they're on there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that would probably be the best way for your listeners to go kind of see some live action stories of some of the greatest saves you've ever heard of in air traffic. That's
most of what the students asked. They didn't ask a whole lot, to be honest, but I did put one up here that I wouldn't mind summing it all up with a little bit, because, maybe it's y'all's last chance to say your piece here. But the reason I say that is because I wanted to ask the 3 things you really want pilots to know if you had to choose, like that you feel like maybe they don't know, or you would want them to know from working your job day in and day out.
3 things.
Maybe just one.
Legal isn't always safe.
Okay.
I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
My bad. I talked over it for a second. Do you mind saying it one more time?
Oh, legal isn't always safe. We're not all jerks. Some controllers are. But a lot of pilots are scared to call us because they had a bad experience 1 or 2 times, so they just assume we're all jerks. We're not. Some are, as with any job, any career.
You're right.
Yeah.
And call us. Flight following. Just flight following. If I
Yeah.
can help you, I will. If I don't have time, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you gotta afford us that opportunity to help you. Don't just sit there and assume that we're too busy to work you. You could be the problem child by not calling us. You could be the one who's making us a lot busier because you're in a bad spot.
Yeah.
And we're not scary. For people who are watching us live or on the video, we're not scary people. We're here to help you. That is literally our job, is to help you be safe up there and to get from point A to point B safely. Yeah. And we want to talk to you. That is our job to do so. Just give us the opportunity to help you and keep you safe.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys coming through. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions still, like I just said. Please, this is one of those situations. If you're still watching, if you're still listening, leave a comment. If you're on a streaming platform, you can go to the YouTube, or you can go to our Instagram and leave a comment there. But we'd love to hear pilots asking questions for these guys, especially after the things you've heard them talk about and bring to light. So we want that communication to happen. Even if it's something you're like, hey, that doesn't make sense to me. Like, please say that. We want to ask again, because I imagine we'll have some more conversations with you guys.
That'd be great.
Maybe make even some content, like I said, but we'll be in more communication.
There's one last thing I wanted to add with regard to the pilot outreach programs, and I don't care where you are throughout the country. I can't guarantee there's going to be a formal program at the facility near you, like we have at Fort Worth Center. If you are local to North Texas, please sign up to be a part of our pilot outreach program. Come into Fort Worth Center, see what we're doing. Listen to us, live on the radio. You can sign up by simply just the best way, honestly, is just sending an email to tourzfw. So it's TOURZFW. That's our 3-letter facility name at gmail.com. Just tourzfw at gmail.com. Say, hi, I'd like a tour. It's going to auto reply a link that you can sign up. But if you're not local to North Texas, call your local Class Delta tower. I think every single pilot needs to go up at least to a control tower. And specifically Class Delta, they're pretty easy to get up to. Usually they're very welcoming, those controllers. You're really putting that voice behind, the face behind the voice rather, when you go up there. And it's really going to put things in perspective when you go up there. So please, whether it's you're calling up on a slow ground frequency, hey, you got time for us to check out the tower, or just Google. Usually you can find the cell phone number, or the phone number for the tower cab. It's a little intimidating. They're going to answer like so-and-so tower. And it's like, oh, okay, I'm just calling for a tour, please. But I promise we're not scary, and do yourself the favor to go check out facilities.
And that's what I want to say. That sounds like you'd be doing yourself a favor there. Just let's say you are a little nervous about getting on the mic and talking. Maybe you don't want to talk too long. Maybe you don't want to say the wrong thing, or you're not even sure what to say. Like, it sounds like a good reason to go ahead and take a tour. Just know that the tour is available. And I feel like that's probably something that people wouldn't think is available. Taking tours is available.
You just got to ask.
Yep.
That's all you got to do.
Gotcha. Okay, well, we've got a lot of good stuff here. Again, appreciate you, Mike. Appreciate you, Kevin. This is Zach, your host. And if you're watching again, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff.